I had been working as a curator in a renowned museum for almost 5 years. It was a job that I dearly loved and cherished. The staff was great as well, and our boss was a kind person. I had never thought of leaving the job because I was truly fulfilled. That was until my boss quit and we got a new boss. The new boss had bought the museum. He appointed himself as the head of the company. As a curator, I couldn't allow myself to make a mistake. I was adept at what I did and managed more responsibilities than I was paid for. I didn't mind because I truly loved doing it. The new boss was different from my old boss. He would nitpick over everything, even if nothing was wrong. He would usually be on his phone most of the time and wouldn't care when we reached out to him. He had been there for over a month, but he had no idea of our upcoming exhibitions or funds in board meetings. We had several important responsibilities from curating and archiving to conservation and art handling. He seemed disinterested in all of it. He was just happy knowing that we did all of our work efficiently and he didn't have to invest much time in it. A few months later, our team decided to go out for drinks. We had no plans to ask our boss to join us, but he spotted us anyway and joined. We were having fun as usual, and we were all adults. There was no reason why we should have been cautious around him. This was how we were with our old boss, and she never minded it, so we didn't think he would mind either. At some point, he made a comment about us being irresponsible and having a bad attitude in the work environment. As soon as he said that, everyone was quiet. Everyone in our team was a hard worker. No one was a slacker, and we took great pride in our skills. As a lead curator, I was in the senior-most position among my peers. I wanted to say something, but my colleague, who was an archivist, signaled me to hold back. He was so drunk, so we thought it would be best to ignore him. A new member had been added to our team a few weeks ago. She was fresh out of college and learning her duties. She was eager and diligent. However, the boss didn't like her because she once gave him the wrong coffee. Since then, he had been passive-aggressive and a bit mean towards her. As they were drinking, my boss scorned the new girl and said that she was extremely useless. "I'm going to fire you, you good-for-nothing," he said, swaying his head from left to right. I irritably told him that he was too drunk and it was time for him to go home. I asked him if he wanted one of us to carry him to the cab, and for some reason, he felt extremely offended. He banged the table and left. The next day felt quite normal. We had a huge exhibition coming up and everyone was super busy. I suddenly got a call from my boss to meet him in the office once I'm free. I was a bit anxious, so I thought I should meet him first. When I went inside the office, I spotted a man in his early 30s sitting on the couch. I greeted her and then turned towards my boss. "Yes, you called?" He gave a look to the man. I don't know what it was, but I knew that something was wrong. "This is Mr. X. He will be working with you today. Take care of him and teach him the work." I didn't know which position he was assigned to, so I asked him, "What do you want me to train him in?" And he replied nonchalantly, "Just teach him everything. Your work, that archivist's work, and that moron's work. Everything." I still wasn't sure what he wanted, so I asked him for a little help here and there. I had so much work that I had no time to train. The exhibition dates were near, and we had to make sure everything was properly managed. Just a week before the exhibition, the boss called me again. I thought it must be something related to Mr. X's evaluation. As soon as I went there, I saw Mr. X sitting on the chair facing the boss. "Hi, sir. You called me?" I asked nervously, and he smirked and replied, "You've done a good job so far. Now you can finally be relieved from your duties." I didn't understand his words. Was he talking about the part after the exhibition? I asked him what he meant, and he sneered and told me he was firing me. It absolutely made no sense. I demanded to know why I was being fired, without any notice or reason. Mr. X was smiling in his seat, stealing glances of my pathetic expression every now and then. "Why? I want to know." I asked again, and he simply replied that he was assigning my position to Mr. X, who he believed would be a better fit for his museum. He told me that he has given me 2 weeks' notice, so he was expecting me to do my work on time, especially the upcoming exhibition. I was frustrated and angry. How is he a better fit? He knows nothing at all about working in a museum. The worst part is you asking me to take care of such a huge responsibility while you're also firing me. I was greatly pissed. He didn't even flinch. He just told me to take care of my responsibilities. He threatened that he wouldn't pay me well if I didn't do my job properly. I had worked in this museum for 5 years. I also came from a well-off family. The last thing I was worried about was money. I would be skilled enough to get a job elsewhere, and a few months of unemployment wouldn't burn a hole in my pocket. But why are you supporting him so much? The least I deserve is to know how this person would be a better fit. I saw the hesitation in the boss's eyes. Then he finally said, "He's my nephew. He studied abroad in a great university. He will be good at his job." I was furious. I had worked for so many years only to be replaced by someone who didn't even know what they were doing. I wanted to fight, but I didn't. I knew this wouldn't last. His nephew surely had hoped, but it wasn't enough to handle this big of a responsibility. Okay, I understand. I took one glance at him and his nephew and walked away. My peers approached me as they saw me putting all my stuff in a cardboard box. I told them what had happened. I wasn't in the mood to talk, so I just asked the archivist to inform them that I wasn't coming back. Since he fired me without a good reason, I had no intention to complete the work I was assigned. The next day, I received a call from one of the assistants. She was in a frenzy, asking me when I'd show up. I told her that I was no longer working with them. I could hear some sort of panicking noises from the other end of the phone, but I truly didn't even care a little bit. Then she told me how disorganized everything had become, especially since the nephew took control. The whole day, I kept getting calls from everyone in the department telling me how they weren't able to function properly. I had an idea. I reached out to some of the huge artists we usually exhibited in our museum and wrote them an apology email. You know, the usual, "I won't be able to take care of you anymore." And of course, I added the part why I was fired and innocently wrote, "Please forgive him if he makes any mistakes." My clients were my connections. The reason they were invested in our museum was because they were impressed with our work each time. I was the person who they relied on completely, so I was sure that if I reached out, some of them might actually withdraw their exhibitions. It wouldn't happen in the upcoming exhibition, but we had much bigger artists coming later. As I did this, in a few hours, I got a call from my boss. I chose to ignore it. When he had called me more than 3 times, I finally picked up the call and asked him what the matter was. He was panicking, asking me if I told the artist that he fired me. I didn't deny it and told him that it was an official apology letter from my side. There was no reason why I needed someone else's input. Boss hung up the phone immediately. It was only the first of his many, many problems. Over the next 3 days, my peers and I decided to deliberately disrupt the exhibition. They left most of the responsibilities that had nothing to do with their job in the new curator's hands, and didn't do the extra work they had been doing for free all these years. The boss's nephew had no real idea of how things were done, and none of them helped him in any way. I was told that he wasn't even able to promote his ideas in board meetings, initiate community involvement, and review display items in the museum's designated area of authority. I knew the boss would reach out to me eventually. After all, there was no better match for the museum. I had been working there for such a long time that I was very well acquainted with every single corner. A few days later, the boss called me and asked if he could meet me in a cafe near the museum. I didn't hesitate and agreed. I wore my casual clothes and drove to the museum. As soon as he spotted me, he asked me why I wasn't coming to the office anymore. I told him that if he wanted to leave a bad review, he absolutely could. I also told him that I was okay with him deducting my payment. He was shocked, but there was nothing really that he could do. Then he pleaded with me to call the artists and let them know that they would be managed by a brilliant and competent team. I chuckled inside and told him that there was no way I was going to lie to the artists, especially since I know how it had been after I left. He had nothing more to request, so we just parted. Another 3 days passed, and I received another call from him. It was a request to join the museum again. He was willing to give me my position back as head curator and to demote his nephew to the assistant post. I smirked and told him I was only willing to come back if he doubled my pay. He hesitated at first, didn't speak for a solid 30 seconds. Then I heard someone yelling in the background, and he immediately told me that he would double my pay. I joined the office again the next day, and, like I was promised, I got my double pay. The nephew was in no fault, so we helped him in every way we could. But after that, the boss stopped his nitpicking habits and reprimanded the juniors. He also paid more attention to the artists and the meetings. I worked under him for 2 more months and left to join a renowned museum where my pay was 4 times more than what I was being paid. I heard that after some time, most of the people quit and the boss and the board decided to appoint a new boss. I was watching the newest Spider-Man movie with a couple of my friends, males in their early 20s. The theater was packed, and there was a group of annoying high schoolers, males and females 15 to 18 years old, sitting behind us, doing what high schoolers do, taking pictures on Snapchat with flash, talking to each other loudly, riffing on the movie and ads, laughing obnoxiously loud. You get the idea. I was joking, loud enough that I was hoping they could overhear me say to my friend before the movie starts, "If they are this loud during the movie, we're going to have some issues." One of them definitely heard me because the group erupted into laughter. I knew right then and there who I was up against. They heard my condition, they accepted my challenge. It's on. I was almost glad. As you can guess, 15 minutes into the movie, they're all still chatting and being pretty obnoxious. One of my friends gave them an audible shh, and one mutters, "Bitch," under their breath, and they all cracked up. Final straw. These bastards were too smug. They thought they were invincible. Now it's personal. I walk out of the theater and see a worker that looked to be some kind of manager guy. I knew if I said that they were just being obnoxious, the guy would have given them a warning or something because they were just kids. But I was feeling pretty petty. So I walked up to him and said, "There are some people sitting behind me filming the movie." He nodded and just kicked them out. He didn't even ask any questions and didn't believe them when they said they weren't filming the movie because he could hear them chatting the second he walked into the theater. So their credibility was thrown out of the window. He wasn't going to take their word over mine. They were adamant in their defense until this guy pulled out the trump card and said, "I'll call the cops." They proceeded to walk out of the theater, hanging their heads. I and my friends watched the whole movie and were smiling the entire time. Honestly, the best part is that they felt cheated and wronged. They were angry, and there was nothing they could do. In the end, it made the revenge that much sweeter. To clarify, this takes place in Germany. I, a 31-year-old female, had a very weird group of friends in high school. The, if you have friends like this, you don't need enemies kind. One of these girls was Julia. It's a fake name. She treated me horribly, but in the same breath would call me her best friend without letting me really have a say in the matter. She would rip me to shreds behind my back, make up rumors about me, etc. It was a very confusing time, and so our clique stuck together through years of secretly creating drama and disliking each other. In hindsight, all dumb 14-year-old high school girly stuff. But at the time, it truly hurt me a lot. Julia had to repeat a grade and change schools, and I cut the friendship off right there. She still had friends at my school, and the rumors continued for years. Even up to my mid-20s, I would hear from people, "Oh, weren't you the girl who slept with X, Y, and Z?" Even though I was the most boring, introverted high schooler ever. I learned to shrug it off, but knowing so many people had an awful misconception of me because of Julia was disheartening and anxiety-inducing. There was a good chance people my age had heard of me, even if they had never met me. This weekend, I was back in my hometown and attended an event with some of my friends, none of which I went to high school with. We were standing at a table drinking wine and enjoying the sun when one of my friends pointed out that a neighboring table kept looking at me. I looked at it, and it was Julia and a whole bunch of other women, quickly turning their heads away. They had been looking me up and down and clearly gossiping. Now, I'm not currently in my best phase. I've gained some weight. I was dressed cutely but sloppily and was disheveled and sweaty. I felt self-conscious, and obviously this was not how I wanted to meet a person that I had so much bad history with. But I'm not that boring, introverted high schooler anymore. Nowadays, I'm outspoken, opinionated, and a little mischievous when the occasion arises. So, I decided it was time to stretch my acting muscles and be petty for once. I went over, all question marks and polite smiles, being like, "Hi, I saw you looking. Can I help you with anything?" I did not say that sarcastically. I was genuinely just being polite. The women looked surprised, and then one of them pointed at Julia and said, "Oh, no, Julia here just said that you used to go to the same school." I looked Julia right in her face and said super excitedly, "Oh, really? The Montessori school?" Which was my grade school. Julia looked really put off. Her face was super scrunched up, and she replied confused, "No, our high school's name." Listen, I'm not an actress, but I know I pulled this off perfectly. I made a surprised, then pensive face and said, "Oh, and your name is?" I could tell Julia was getting irritated. She said her name, and I thought for a second, and then apologized and said, "Oh my goodness, this is so embarrassing. I really can't place you. How long were we in class together?" "Until 8th grade." She looked so uncomfortable at that. She was looking at my face like she clearly wanted to say more, but couldn't tell if I really didn't remember her. It was glorious. I was acting my butt off, sort of smiling apologetically and saying, "Boy, I'm so sorry. That was nearly 17 years ago. But hey, please don't take it personally. I really only remember the names of the people I was friends with back then." The other women were all sort of chuckling uncomfortably, and one of her friends even said, "Oh yeah, that happens to me all the time too. Like I never place former classmates." We were just laughing a little, and then Julia just threw in a really meek, "We were friends." I wanted to laugh at her at that point, but I kept it in and just sort of shrugged and said, "I'm so sorry, I really don't recall. But hey, it was nice seeing you again. I hope you ladies have a nice rest of the evening." The look on her face when I turned away was priceless. I will dream about it for years. I could tell her other friends didn't really think that much of the whole interaction, but Julia was clearly embarrassed. So I made sure to wink at her when she passed me to leave the event.